Our Sunday study of St. Mark's Gospel continues today in chapter 5. And behold, there cometh a ruler of the synagogue, Jairus by name. And when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet and besought him greatly, saying, My little daughter lieth at the point of death. I pray thee, come and lay thy hands on her, that she may live. It must have caused something of a sensation when the man Jairus made his way through the crowd, flung himself on the ground at Jesus' feet, and in a voice choked with emotion, sobbed and poured out his heart, My little daughter, at the point of death. Come, lay thy hands on her that she may live. That scene tugged at the heartstrings of everyone who saw it. By our standards, that public display of emotion, that groveling gesture on the ground at Jesus' feet would be an embarrassment. But you must remember, the people in the East are very demonstrative of their feelings. In contrast, say, to our Western ways, our reserved Norwegian, German culture. And yet, in time of crisis, I've noticed, nobody stands on ceremony then. For another thing, Jairus was ruler of the synagogue, a well-known figure in the little world of Capernaum. He was the leader of their church. The people could not have conferred a higher honor on a brother than that, to entrust him with their spiritual community, the one place where their souls were nourished and refreshed, and trusted him to safeguard their religious tradition and heritage. To do what he did, Jairus had to go against the grain. His colleagues, the religious leaders, had already condemned publicly this unordained prophet from Nazareth. They charged him with blasphemy when he forgave sin. They claimed he went slumming with the wrong kind of people, a friend of publicans and sinners, they said. They claimed he was really in league with Satan, casting out devils by the devil's power, they said. Jairus knew all that, what his fellow clergymen said. But he cast it all aside to throw himself on the ground at Jesus' feet. The point here is, Jairus does not come as a theologian, a religious leader. He comes as a parent on behalf of his child, his only child. My little daughter, he calls her, loved and precious in his sight. A mere 12 years old, and now on the losing side in the battle for her life. The strongest men and women I have ever met. I mean people who can face personal adversity with courage and dignity, have melted away at the bedside of their own suffering child. They would give their life for the child's life, take all the pains into their own body if they could. But they can't. All of us know the anxiety and the weariness and the heartache when illness enters into our family circle. The sense of helplessness that steals over us when men and medicine have done all that they can do. And there's nothing left but to watch and to wait at the bedside, whispering words of endearment, soothing the fevered brow. The outside world is lost to us. Time itself stands still to us when a loved one lingers in the valley of the shadow of death. Jairus is mentioned only once in this Bible story, but his name is immortal because we can never forget the figure of this kneeling man reaching out for Christ's hand in his helplessness. For 2,000 years in the world around, countless souls in suffering and sorrow and every conceivable calamity have instinctively done the same thing. Reached out for Christ's hand. Their first thought is to go and tell Jesus. They want him to know. They feel that he can and he will help them. For they know that there are limitations to the law of life, which says, bear ye one another's burdens. But in the final resort, each one of us bears his own burden, endures his own pain, faces his own sorrow, and dies his own death. And yet Jesus is not shut out the way others are. He enters in a way in which you're never in it alone. There's always two of you in this thing together, Christ and you. We can experience better than we can explain the old Bible passage which says, He has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. He lightens our burden by sharing the burden with us. He enters into our sorrows. He accepts the consequences of sin and the sin itself and carries it to the cross and thereby carries it away. But there's something else here. And every parent will recognize it at once. If you've ever cradled in your arms a newborn infant, you're awed by how utterly helpless and unequipped that child is to face the world, which is always worse than we thought it was. Now we can feed them and clothe them and house them and educate them and equip them, but we know, man, they need something more than that. They need a wholeness and courage and a power to sustain them for the long journey. That's something only Jesus can give. Oh Lord, my little daughter, my boy, lay thy hand on them and they shall live. The Department of Labor tells us that there are 22,000 ways for Americans to make a living. And there's probably just as many illegal ways for Americans to make a living. But the point is, making a living and living a life are two different things. A recent cartoon captured the spirit of our times. It showed Christopher Columbus sunk down in his easy chair watching the Discovery Channel instead of being out there discovering the new world. We have become a nation of voyeurs, encamped in front of our computer and television screens, watching other people live. You ask a kid what he did in the afternoon and he tells you he was playing ball. You don't know whether he was on a sandlot or on a video game. Haven't you met them? These human zombies? They walk, they talk, they eat, they drink. The lights are on, but nobody's home. They're boring and bored and empty and aimless, and a symptom of that empty life. No fire, no passion is our compulsive quest for thrills, for entertainment. Traipsing off to Disneyland, Adventureland, 5 flags over something land. Don't misunderstand. Nothing wrong with going to an amusement park. Nobody's a bigger fan of the roller coaster than I am. And they tell me they got some monster machines out there now. You want a real roller coaster ride? Why don't you enter into life where you are, not somewhere else? Now, not later. Many of you have seen Thornton Wilder's play, Our Town. Haven't you? High school drama clubs used to put that thing on every other year, whether you liked it or not. The main character in the story is a girl by the name of Emily, who later dies in childbirth. In the afterlife, she begs the spirits to let her go back and live one day with seeing eyes. And she chooses the day of her 12th birthday and watches herself and her family live out that single day. Her mother barely lifts her tired face from the kitchen stove. Her father walks right by her without a word because he's worried about his business. The spirits warned her not to do it. And now she knows why they warned her not to do it. She can't stand it. She's shocked that these people do not enter into life. No appreciation, no awareness of how precious the moment is. So she shouts at her parents, but they can't hear her. Don't you understand? Don't you know? You will never have this moment again forever. She shouts at herself, but of course she cannot hear. And then she stops and turns to the audience and says, do any of you understand? Do any of you live while you're alive? Good question. The gospel message is not about pie in the sky when you die. You know what Jesus did for you and what Jesus will do for you. But are you remembering what Jesus does for you right now? Jesus claims that He can invade you and infuse you and equip you and empower you and enthuse you to live life fully, passionately, to the extent I have come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. That's what the Bible means when it says He made us alive who were dead in trespasses and sins. And what it means when it says awake, for the crying out loud, awake, O sleepers, rise from the dead, and Christ will give you light. What it means when it says, I'll redeem the time. Every funeral you ever been to, every cemetery you see reminds you, time is running out. The game will soon be over. You don't get to go back and replay it. And if you ignore the common, everyday life that you have now, if you fail to seize the moment and live it to the fullest, well, then our faith is counterfeit and contrary to everything that Christ taught us. O Lord, lay thy hands upon us that we may live